Hi, and welcome back to Matty Ice Investing, your home for investing education and entertainment. All right, on today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about Taiwan Semiconductor. For those who don't know, TSMC is the world's leading semiconductor foundry and the backbone of modern electronics manufacturing chips for companies like Apple, Nvidia, AMD, and Qualcomm. They were founded back in 1987 in Taiwan, and they really pioneered the pure play foundry model. This allowed designers to outsource fabrication entirely and really has been a cornerstone in how we've gotten to where we are today in the semiconductor business. These days, they've really focused on making the most advanced chips on the planet, including their 3 nanometer and soon to be their 2 nanometer class nodes, which I think is going to help put them in a great spot as we go forward there. And so today, TSMC announced their Q4 results. We'll take a quick look at those, as well as do a quick SWOT analysis on them and see what makes sense as far as whether I'm going to be picking more up this year. All right, today I want to take a look at a SWOT analysis for TSMC. If you're not familiar with SWOT, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we'll dive into some of those as we go through. And then as a bit of a bonus, I'll take a look at some headwinds and tailwinds for us as well. So what I want to cover off first is the strengths. So when I look at TSMC, I really look at the unmatched market leadership that they have. They control about 60-ish% of the global foundry market. And this is almost a near monopoly when you think about it, when you're looking at the 7 nanometer designs that are out there. This really gives them that advantage compared to their competitors. The next is looking at the technological dominance. So they've got a proven 3 nanometer mass production. This is really clear when you look at the roadmap and has given them that chance to get down to the 2 nanometer and beyond, which gets just that thinner and better use out of their technology that they have there. They've got the technology dominance, they've got their proven 3 nanometer mass production, and this gives them a clear roadmap to 2 nm or nanometer and then beyond. This is another key piece with their technology development that I think is going to give them that edge. Another strength for them is their operational excellence. So they've really done a good job of building it out, getting that industry-leading yields that they've been known for over the past few years. And they have this really strong platform, their open innovation platform, which gives them that ecosystem that allows them to have that advantage as well. Next up is their financial strength. So they've got a strong profitability and cash flow. I think we'll see some of that in the results here today. Also, when you look at what they've done before, they had 32 billion in 2024 for CapEx. I mean, that's just a great number for them. So they've got that strength, which allows them to open up some opportunities for themselves. And last but not least, they've got a diverse customer base. So when you think about who their major customers are, you think of names like Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, and the list keeps going on and on. They really also serve, the computer chip market, the mobile market, the automotive market, the Internet of Things. They really do have that diverse base, and that's really going to put them, I think, in a strong position. So when you look at their strengths, very strong coming out of the gate there. All right, let's switch over to weaknesses now. Now, unfortunately, TSMC is not an undefeated company. They do have a few weaknesses, and we're going to dive into some of them right here. So the first and probably the most important one is they've got an extreme geographic concentration there. So the majority of their advanced node capacity remains in Taiwan. They are starting to look for ways to get out of there, but creating a single point of failure risk, if anything were to happen there, and that's been a risk that's been raised by numerous investors in the past, that remains probably the biggest concern I have personally on them. Next up, you'll see rising CapEx burden. So everything's getting more expensive, and there's no difference for TMC or TSMC as well. So they've had a lot of expenditures going up. I anticipate they'll raise their expenditures as we continue to go forward, trying to reinvest. But that's a bit of a concern as well, despite the fact that they've got really good free cash flow. That can have a bit of a burden on what they're trying to accomplish. So next up is the complexity of advanced nodes. So each new node increases process difficulty. So as you get into those thinner nanometers, it causes a bit of a challenge for them, and this is leading to slowing yield ramps and rising costs. So something they'll have to continue to manage, but a bit of a weakness they need to be aware of and dealing with there. The next is talent constraints. So, certainly difficult in transferring expertise and maintaining that. It takes very highly skilled individuals to be able to do this, and building out and addressing that talent gap is definitely a challenge that faces TSMC as they go forward here. And then last but not least is the demand remains concentrated in cyclical end markets. And so when you think about the cyclicality of that, we go through these booms and busts of where people are upgrading cell phones and smartphones and their PCs and just you see those booms, and that will drive demand up and down. So there's a bit of cyclicality to it that we got to be aware of as well. All right, next up is their opportunities. And I think the AI supercycle is probably the most important one for them. Everywhere you look these days, there's talk about the AI supercycle. How long will this continue for? How big is it going to get? You've got folks like NVIDIA and AMD constantly driving forward demand. And this is returning great opportunities for a company like TSMC. The AI related revenue is expected to grow about 40%, I believe, for their CAGR through 2030. So lots of good opportunity there. The next one I want to talk a little bit about is their advanced packaging. So they've done a great job with what's called CoWoS, which is chip on wafer on substrate. And this is where they can start to get more out of what they're currently doing. So they're able to leverage this. It's a strategic position or a strategic leveraging opportunity that they have. And this gives them a chance to drive pricing power and really get the value. I think it's sort of like squeezing a little bit more out of what they're able to get off the wafers and make the most use out of those. The next one is global diversification. So certainly we talked a little bit a moment ago about how they're very concentrated in Taiwan. They are looking to expand. They have fabs now in the US, Japan, Europe, trying to reduce that globalization and concentration risk. I think that'll only go a far way to help diversify them and expand their reach. So I think that's a great opportunity for them, but something they're going to have to continue to invest in. Their automotive and industrial growth, we're really seeing a lot of dominance in there. The advanced driver assistance systems that they've got, I think, are going to be great for this business. So I think that just creates another opportunity for the company to grow. And then we've also got our 2nm and below. So just getting that nanometer to even smaller gives them just a bit more opportunity, a bit more growth, a bit more advantage. So that's an opportunity they're going to continue to go in there and lead the market, I believe, in this space. Last but not least, we'll take a quick look at their threats. So the first threat is a bit of a geopolitical piece to it. Having the bulk of their operations in Taiwan and being held to the Taiwan Strait and the challenges that are there really is a big risk for them. So when you think about what goes through there, it can become a choke point. It's kind of been referred to as a global economic choke point at times. Roughly 50% of the world's container traffic actually passes through there. And if there were anything to sort of happen to that would really have an impact on TSMC among other areas. So that's definitely a threat that we need to be aware of. Next up here, I'll talk a little bit about the aggressive competition. So any industry like this that has lots of good opportunity and profits and growth is going to have lots of opportunity for competition. And I would say, when you think of somebody that's really out there that's competing with someone like Taiwan Semiconductor, Samsung really jumps to my mind. I think they've got a really good product as well with what they're building, and they're really working to close that technology gap. So I think for me, TSMC is probably still the number one leader, but Samsung is definitely coming on strong, and I think they could certainly put some pressure on TSMC as we go forward here. All right, the next one here is really looking at sort of those controls and regulation pressures. So there is a lot of control out there. You got the US China restrictions that seem to go on and off occasionally. You really got to be mindful of what that could have. There could be a lot of limits put on at some point. The world just seems like a bit of a challenging place these days. So really thinking about what that could have on the exports makes a big difference here. So, things like tariffs and things like that could really have an impact. And then last but not least is really the supply chain fragility. So, you've got very few suppliers that can help provide the products that someone like an TSMC is looking for here. You've got ASML, I think, is a great one there, and their EUV tools, but there's really not a lot of them out there. And so really depending on a single source or very limited source can also provide some of those threats as well. So that's our look at the SWOT for TSMC. Now I want to jump into a bit of headwinds and tailwinds on the company. So when you think about TSMC and looking at sort of the headwinds, so these are things that are kind of pushing against them. If you think about sort of walking face forward into the wind, and some of these we've talked a little bit about through the SWOT analysis, but the geopolitical instability in Taiwan probably remains one of the major headwinds. It's something you've always got to be mindful of. There's always this sort of, I feel like, rising military tension that can be out there, dealing with the Chinese government. Things like that can always have a bit of an impact on it. So you just got to be mindful that that's going to be something that could be pushing against it. U.S. tariffs and export controls. We talked a little bit about some of that. I believe the proposed U.S. tariffs are at about 32% last time I checked, and threatening some of the AI chip exports. So that's another thing that could have an impact on it. And these are things that obviously TSMC doesn't have a lot of control over, but certainly things that they're going to be up against and need to deal with there. There's also currency headwinds. Anytime that you're trading dollars back and forth, just making sure that we're keeping an eye on that. That could have either a good tailwind or a good headwind against the organization, depending on what that looks like as we go forward. Intensifying competition from Intel and Samsung. I talked a little bit about Samsung already, but Intel as well. Both are very strong, aggressive competitors out there looking for ways to, increase their product and increase their presence in the market there. We want to make sure that we're understanding if they've got some other sort of benefits that are coming in, or maybe it's an opportunity to sort of spread some of the investments around between different companies. And the last one on here is supply chain constraints. So shortages in the EUV tools. We talked a little bit about that just a moment ago. The rare gases, all that threatened production can be an issue there. And just because there's so many limited suppliers, it can become a big issue if there's any sort of slowdown or restrictions or any challenges placed upon them. All right, looking over at the tailwinds. So these are great things that are helping support the business as it continues to go. So the first and probably the best one out there is the AI driver. You really think about all this AI boom that's out there. This is really doing nothing but helping companies like Taiwan Semiconductor continue to move forward. So they're taking advantage of that as much as they can, working closely, supporting their customers like NVIDIA. All of that as it continues to go is just going to continue to help them and be a strong push in their business. The next one on the list here is looking at the CoWoS and advanced packaging bottleneck advantage. So what Taiwan Semiconductor they've got a lot of control over the advanced packaging capabilities that they have out there. They're able to control that quite well and take advantage of it. So getting those that CoWoS or that chip on wafer substack really helps them get the most out of the value that they have there. The next one is the global fab diversification. So again, spreading out their fabrication across the globe, making that less of a concern. I think that's been a great piece. It helps reduce some of that geopolitical concentration, opens up access to other subsidies. So, this I think is going to be a big advantage for them in an area they're going to continue to focus in on. The next one is the leadership in the 3 and 2 nanometer nodes. So this, I think, is going to become more of the norm and the expectation as we get to those thinner nodes. And as Taiwan Semiconductor, has been leading that, I think they're going to continue to develop faster and be better at that. So based on what I've seen, the 2 nanometer offerings are about 20% faster performance and 30% better efficiency than the 3Ms. So you get more of that efficiency coming out. I think that's really going to help as the company continues to go forward. And then that broad-based semiconductor recovery. So we've seen them come down a little bit in the past. I think you're seeing a lot more of that drive coming up. It seems like everything's got semiconductors in it these days, from EVs and the Internet of Things and every computer and phone out there. So I think as more and more tech comes out and that alignment with the AI is the first point there, you're really going to see these start to push the company forward. All right, and looking at TSMC's Q4 2025 results, they released those here on September 15th. A couple of key takeaways that I had for my review of them was revenue came in, as expected. So the actual revenue came in at about just north of 33 billion US. That's right in line with the guidance, right towards the top end of that. So you got to like what's looking at there. The next up is looking at these margins. So the gross margin actual was just a shade under 60%. That's right in line with the guidance. So again, a good meet on that one. And then the operating margin, again, right in line with where the guidance was. So as an investor, you got to be happy with everything you're seeing there. I think everything's looking good and they're continuing to project exactly as intended. So the only last question I want to answer is, am I buying TSMC? And so when I look at TSMC, I'm really a big fan of what they've got going on. I think they've been growing their business the last few years. I think they've got a lot of good support. It does come with some risks. We talked about the geopolitical stuff, some location-based challenges that are out there, competition. For me, I think they're a good buy. I'm going to be looking to add them to the portfolio this year. The one other hesitation I have is just they're a bit on the expensive side right now. I'd love to see them come back a bit. So I was kind of hoping they'd miss on these results this quarter. But that said, they're a great holding. And if you're interested in seeing more of what I'm holding, why don't you click on the video here on the link and see what's up next. Thanks. Bye.